So now that we've covered the nature of joy and the obstacles of joy in the previous sessions, we're going to move into something completely different for the next couple of weeks. And that is looking at more of the positive qualities that allow us to sustain this experience of joy. So no more talking about dinner. The first one, if you've done the reading, is of these 8 pillars of joy. And I wondered why they chose to divide it up into 8 pillars or 8 ideas. And I can only speculate that since the Dalai Lama there is that maybe there was a Buddhist influence, because in Buddhism you have the 8, well, you have the middle way, which is defined as the 8 principles of Buddhism: the right view, the right resolve, the right speech, right action, right livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. So it kind of follows along the same way. Some are from the heart and some are from the mind. The first one is from the mind perspective. There are many different angles. If we go to page 194, and if you don't have the book, that's okay, I'm going to read it out. This is the Dalai Lama speaking, and he says that for every event in life, there are many different angles. When you look at the same event from a wider perspective, your sense of worry and anxiety reduces and you have greater joy. So this is, he's introducing this concept of reframing to a more positivity. So when you look back at your own life, can you think of any events, any personal events, or things that might have happened to you that that you looked at now through hindsight with an open perspective? Did this reframing, was it positive? It might have been something that was challenging or maybe traumatic, and then you look at it from a different perspective.
When we were being transferred, we were supposed to go to the East Coast. And we had it all organized. I had a house rented, I had colors painted, picked out, I had a meeting with the principal, and I was at the mall with 1,000 miles, that's probably not that many, 400 of my, closest 5th graders at a science fair, and I got a phone call saying, we're not going to Buffalo, we're going to Denver. It's like, yeah, that wasn't the plan. I had relatives in north of Buffalo, and a good friend in Buffalo. I had it all organized. But by then we burned enough, because I spent 6 months whining that we had to move, because, I'm surprised to have any friends left. But as it turned out, it was such a gift, because first of all, it's Denver. Secondly, everybody who was transferred to the East Coast was fired within a year. So we'd have been stuck in Buffalo with no job. And we got here, and I looked at the place and went, oh, I know this place. It's Calgary South. We're good.
Right.
So no way. I mean, if he'd said we have to move to Denver, I'd go, forget it, quit. We're finding something else. But as it turned out, God dragged me along on my plan long enough for his plan to get into place, and it worked. It was way better. So in retrospect, it was a much better deal. But that night I wasn't too happy.
So what I hear in your story is that you chose your response, that instead of a fixed mindset, you sort of had an open mindset. Let's see what it's like. And then, lo and behold, it turned out to be a pretty good decision to do that. Anybody else?
This didn't happen to me, but it's, a lot of what we're seeing here looks a lot like appreciative inquiry. Can you see something with a different eye? One of the stories that one of these authors tells is there was a horrific accident in a factory, and a person mangled and all of this kind of stuff. And through one lens, it was just awful, this person that was all mangled and everything else. And through another lens, all of these people jumped up to help. And so it's exactly the same. Everybody experienced the same thing, but some folks just saw it as just the awfulness of the accident, and other people sort of said, "This is an opportunity. We can be a community, we can help people do those kinds of things." So that was
And that's true about many catastrophes, the floods, the hurricanes, the tornadoes. It's terrible, but man, they can come together and work it.
Fortunately, there was a mass shooting in Christchurch in New Zealand about a decade ago. And for them, it's not like America where we have it every day. They never have stuff like that. So it's just shocking and dramatic. And then there was a storm that came through and brought the community together. Okay, so this reframing of new positivity leading to a new understanding. So this sounds like there's some hindsight that's involved in order to do that and some reflection. Moving to the second question now, on page 199. Here, this is the author, Douglas Abrams, speaking now, is taking a God's eye perspective, as the Archbishop might say, allows us to transcend our limited identity and limited self-interest. One does not have to believe in God to experience this mind-altering shift in perspective. The famous overview effect is perhaps the most profound example. And this is the astronauts. You might remember the Apollo astronauts that I was a child at that point. But I remember Apollo 8 on Christmas Eve, where they read from Genesis. That was very moving. Tears in my eyes. And then there was one where on the way to the moon, I forget what mission this was, but one of the astronauts was looking out the window at the Earth, and he put his thumb up, and his thumb covered the Earth. A sense of, insignificance, all the warring that goes on. So could be taking this God's eye perspective, does it allow you the mental room to deal with frustrating situations like traffic jams? What's your impression of that?
I frequently ask myself, is this going to matter in 30 years? And if it isn't going to matter in 30 years, maybe I don't need to invest too much energy into it.
Or is it going to matter tomorrow? Sometimes I have problems with that. The idea of the stoplights. I had 19 lights between here and home. So it's either going to take me 8 minutes to get here or 23.
Depends how many green lights you had. We had a church member, I thought would have been a great ad for the church. One time I said, Harry, how'd you get here? And he said, I hit 14 lights green getting here on time. And I thought that'd be a great ad,
Yeah.
Episcopal Church, Harry got it in 14 lights. Come and see us. He was so proud of it.
Yeah, when I'm in traffic and getting upset with somebody behaving badly, which of course couldn't be me. I try to say, okay, I try to go and say, what would God be seeing in this that I can't see? What's going on? And I usually lose. I get out of it before I get too tangled.
I drive 5 miles over the speed limit. I pass nobody. Everybody goes by me.
You're right.
And then they cut me off. And sometimes when I'm getting over and the guy behind me is giving me a half a peace sign. And it's never this bad. But I always say to him, thank you for that half a peace sign. And then say, okay, don't get me, just calm down.
The other thing I do is whenever I manage to get, change the lane or whatever, I always, no matter whether they helped or not.
I gotta remember that. How could you get mad at an old guy waving to you?
Yeah,
Well, or this is, I think, the thing, thanks for your help.
right.
Mike, just make sure you're not waving with the other half of the piece.
There are things in life that piss me off, but traffic is rarely it. I always figure if I'm 80% of the time I'm going faster than I can walk, I'm winning.
That is great.
And, you know, most of the time, I get it, so,
Well, you can't go speed limit because they're right on you.
oh, I know,
If
yeah.
you go 5 miles over, they'll give you a car. If you go 10 miles over, then you're okay. I'm not going 10 miles over.
You know, one time I was going somewhere and I was on 225 heading towards 25, and there must have been a bad accident or something, because we weren't going anywhere. I mean, we were in the park, we weren't even on the brakes. And in this glorious flight of
Pelicans?
pelicans came over, there must have been 25 of them.
Wow.
And I mean,
Wow.
I would have missed that if we'd been trucking along
Wow.
the freeway,
Right.
you know? It's like, okay, thanks, God, you know?
25.
Yeah.
I think I've seen 2 or 3, and that's it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I always figure if I'm going faster than I can walk, this is good.
I read in the paper this week that there is a black hole that's enveloping
Mhm.
other universes.
Yeah.
And it might reach us in 1 billion years.
Oh dear, I'll worry all night
So,
now.
I mean, does that put us in like, really? Does this really matter? Whoa.
I guess I give up on that.
The challenge would be for us to be there when that happens.
Hey, if you believe in reincarnation, we will be. Thanks, honey.
Yeah, right.
Years ago, I was teaching a class of astronomy, and they were using it as this particular class was being used as a credit for graduation, so it wasn't the most interesting crowd. And so I was struggling to make it interesting, so I decided to change the syllabus all around 10 ways astronomy can kill you.
wow.
They loved it. Well, you could basically cover everything.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
asteroid strikes, supernova, black holes, et cetera, et cetera.
I think we anticipate things, often expecting worse.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, 10 years or so ago, I never could have on the ground, or something like that.
Mhm.
Everybody, and so the dentist said, here, I'll prescribe you some Vicodin that you can take before you come in, so it's your anxiety level. And I got up and I didn't take Vicodin. I didn't really need it, and I took aspirin and something like that afterward. But I got in the car, and she told me how long this procedure was going to take. And I got in the car and I said, in 3 hours this will be over. And I use that all the time, whether it's a meeting that I don't want to have, or a dentist appointment, or something like that. It's, well, in 27 minutes it's all over. And, and then my anxiety level goes down when I realize that there's something on the other side of this.
Well, Gary, I expected the Nuggets to lose last night. And
By
when
30
they won,
points.
I had great joy.
Pretty much put the cap on that series.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah, so knowing either a time frame, 3 hours, or maybe just knowing that you're going to get through it. Sometimes the time frame is ambiguous. And an example of that is, going back to what Mike was saying about the victory sign or peace sign, is Churchill, right? So the Blitzkrieg was starting, and it could have been horrible, and it was horrible, and it was all uncertain. I mean, Britain has never been attacked like that. And for the newspapers, he was stopped before going into his bunker, and he did that, right? And you know the story because we talked about it over breakfast, but this is an obscene
That means
expression.
up yours.
Yeah,
In
but he
Britain.
didn't know that, and
In
his secretary, his dictation secretary, explained it to him. And he goes, "Oh, they'll figure it out." And so then the victory side became this, because it was something that they could hold on to.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have anything to hold on to. I mean, Hitler was attacking them with the bombers.
Yeah, no, I remember a time when I was really, really sick, and we just couldn't get a handle on it. My asthma was beyond out of control. And I went to the doctor and they said, you need to tell me this will stop. This is not the rest of my life. I don't care when, But you just need to tell me that, because if, this is it, I'm finding a good bridge, and there are good bridges in Denver, you know. And I'm, you know, he might have lied, I don't care, but he said, oh, no, it's gonna stop, and that's all I needed, but I needed that little piece of hope,
Right.
you know, that this is not going to be forever.
Uh-huh.
And it's really sad because our lives have become, when you're on the computer after, for me, it's 2.5 seconds. For my son, it's a half second.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
We can't think in even 3 months or a year.
Mhm.
And for COVID, I knew it was gonna end, but for me, it was 2 years.
Mhm.
But 2 years over 80, it's nothing.
One thing this book's done for me is it has taught me to appreciate every day. I was walking the dog this morning and I'm thinking, you gotta appreciate this walk because you just don't know what's gonna happen in the future. And I think that's the one thing that the book has really made me stop and think. Appreciate the day because you don't know what tomorrow will hold.
Or just appreciate it because you're in it.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about tomorrow at all.
And gratitude,
Yeah,
that's one of the pillars of joy, as we'll talk about later. Okay, so we ready to move on to the second one? So the next one is humility. I tried to look humble and modest. And this is kind of funny because they make fun of themselves. So on page 213, so it's at the end of this section on humility. And the Archbishop laughed too, trying to keep himself humble. When we have humility, we can laugh at ourselves. It was surprising to hear the Archbishop and the Dalai Lama describe the importance of a proper sense of humor, and especially the ability to laugh at our own foibles as essential to the cultivation of joy. Mary, this is one of the things that I so admire about you, because you're self-effacing and you have such a great sense of humor.
There's really nothing to it.
Same, is having a sense of humor a gift, or is it cultivated? Maybe we'll start with you, Mary. And then how does it lay the groundwork for acceptance? So are people born with a sense of humor, or is it cultivated?
You know, just, I was called back to St. Anne's, the chaplain there resigned before the end of the school year, and I needed to conduct this ceremony that's a May Day ceremony, and a chaplain is in charge, is the MC of it. And I put on this coat, which is, it's very old, I don't know how many more May Days it's gonna get through, you know, but it has sort of a, you know, and I'm walking back with the kids, they're all lined up because every kid marches out and joins this thing. Some are getting nervous, you know, and when I walk up to them, I said, you know what I feel like when I'm wearing this thing? I feel like Darth Vader.
Oh, that just breaks everything, yeah.
And they can't be serious any longer, they just have to laugh.
Okay.
Dun, 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 dun.
What was the breathing?
Yeah, I would echo what Mark said. I mean, I listen to you and I'm trying to figure out exactly the depth of what you just said, and then you'll laugh. And I'm going, oh, okay, that's fine.
Takes the edge off.
Yeah.
I don't want to stereotype anybody, so just hear what I say in that regard, partly because I just don't know enough. But Episcopalians often talk about our foibles. You know, we make fun of ourselves a lot. And I don't know how that relates to issues of joy or something like that, but I think of some of the other religious groups that I know about. And I rarely see that sort of self-deprecating or self-referential humor. And I don't want to, but I don't live in that world, you know. So if you're a member of the Church of the Brethren and you're with other members of the Church of the Brethren, you may yuck it up all the time about how weird you are. You know, I don't know. So I just wonder if there's something else about that sense of humor. I'm not sort of whether it's related to joy or whether it's a relation of perspective. Again, that, oh, we think this is so important, but isn't it silly? Kind of like, oh, we think this is so bad, but look what else happened. You know, if there's that sense of perspective that humor or humility, humor and humility working together have effect. I don't know.
I wonder if some of it is the, trying to say this in a respectful way, and it's not gonna come out that way, but I don't mean it disrespectfully, but sort of our loosey-goosey approach to what you have to believe. You know, I mean, if you go around the room and discuss Trinity, we're all gonna have different perspectives on it, and nobody's going to hell for that. Whereas if you're in a congregation of some kind where if you don't toe the line, the party line, as it were, then you might be going to hell for that. Well, you don't, it's not safe to laugh about the fact that you really kind of wonder if this is real or not. But I wonder if some of it is our openness to questioning. I guess that's really how it should be.
Our corporate culture. And a good example of what both of you are talking about is, I think, Robin Williams, story that he was substance abuse and so forth, and that's the one religion. He said, well, I think I fit best into Episcopalians because it's Catholic light.
One of the reasons I love to give people tours of the church because I'm trying to get them to open up. and you use humility in that, but I kept asking this morning with the three of you, do you have any questions? And it was no. It was almost like, just get this done. Now, I know that's not what they were thinking, but I was having that feeling like, just get this done so I can get out of here. Yeah.
Well, Jim, I have to share with you that while we were in coffee today, and you came into and you brought them into the kitchen. I said, well, I remember when Jim gave me my tour, and I didn't get to go to the kitchen. What's in the kitchen?
Oh, no, that was the end of the tour. So I just said, hey, any questions you have, and so forth.
So you were just in a private room? And just
where they could ask me any questions, and they were very nice. They didn't.
Well, you forgot to give that to Mark.
Huh?
You forgot to give that to Mark, and he still joined.
Right, yeah. Well, it shows a personal side in the church, and at the end of it, what I said is, we'd love to have you join us here, but I have to tell you, this is my family, and that's how I feel about this church. And I'm trying to get them feeling that it's more like a family than it is a church from the standpoint, and we'll see.
Or like Cheers, where everybody knows your name.
Yeah, it is.
Cheers, Paul.
But the other thing that might make us humorous is that we do have a lot of ritual, which can be ridiculous.
It takes a priest to say
It's easy to make humor out of that.
But humor is like a door that opens up the communication. Father gave a sermon this morning, and he was talking about how people dress by code and colors.
Yeah.
We were all snickering.
Right.
So then when the message came across, the snickering says, oh, it's too late, the door's open. Now we can get the message.
I thought it was fascinating. One of them was this morning, one was Baptist and one was Catholic. And they'd never been in an Episcopal church before. I was just curious on how they reacted, but.
Like husband and wife?
Yeah. And they were positive, so that's good.
I remember down south, if you will, but a Baptist couple came to our church, and I knew them outside of this.
Mm-hmm.
And they went through the entire service, and when they finished, it didn't suit them. They weren't liturgical, but they said, you guys really do worship God.
Yeah.
As advertised.
Yeah, because when I grew up, there was a period of time when I went to Sunday school at a Baptist church because it was next door. Parents sent
Yeah,
kids to. And it was all about rules and stuff. It wasn't about God of feeling. It was God of rules. It's like, okay.
To your question about, are we born with humor or is it cultivated? I tend to think it's both. I think of my grandson who, even pretty young kids can display a sense of humor, which I tend to think is inborn. But for me personally, I think a lot of my humor is based on what I've seen in others.
Yeah, and just to pick up on the idea of seeing with others, the next question is it easier to see humility in other people than to know you have it yourself? I think humility and this humor idea come hand in hand. And if we could just now think about, is it easier to see it in other people versus ourselves?
I would say, yeah, I think it's a question of perspective again. But I think that the flip side is just as easily true, so we may think that we're being really humble or something. Other people may think
For myself, I find sometimes I use humor to deflect. Because particularly when someone would say something positive to me and to, like a compliment, that, I tend to think that I'm not worthy of it, so I make a little joke about it. I probably need just to be more accepting.
it really is hard for me not to do it. I realize that I shouldn't, and I sometimes stop myself, most of the time. But it's hard.
Habits over a lifetime.
One of the things I think my parents taught me this, I'm not claiming to be humble, okay? But
We all agree.
is that they said you have to learn how to accept a compliment. And they sort of drilled that into me from very early and just said, thank you very much. And I don't, whether there's any agreement with whether or not they were true in their assessment, they were correct in their assessment, at least you're acknowledging them in that kind of way. And yeah, there are certainly times that self-deprecating humor in the face of a compliment works. Other times it's just,
The well, thank you is a better way, I think, in many instances, because when I find that I'm using humor to deflect, it just builds tension.
And the other thing is, when someone compliments you, they're giving you a gift.
Right, and it's
when
as
you
if I'm not
deflect
accepting.
it, you're going, I don't respect your
Right,
gift.
right.
And
Yeah,
so
that's
that
a beautiful
deflates,
point.
that deflates their joy, because
Yeah,
there's joy in giving.
That's a
it.
beautiful point.
It's like saying, "Oh, Mikey, why'd you give me this stupid book?" I mean, it's.
The next question on this topic of humility is, does the humility and perspective strengthen our stress resilience and keep us healthier? 15, 20 years ago, there was this movement in education, and it kind of came off on the heels of the Nike campaign, Just Do It, and it was called Grit. That you needed to build more grit in these millennials. And when I was watching it, I felt kind of sad about the whole thing, because that, we're telling them that they need just to be stronger and suck it up and do it. But there wasn't a sense of humility in that message.
Or humor.
Yeah, or humor, right? And there's a passage in here on 2:12 that says, so many people seem to struggle with being kind to themselves. And that's the protest I had about the great movement, that it wasn't being kind. We weren't teaching them to be kind to themselves. We were teaching them hard on themselves.
Anyway, I was at a convention about 2 years ago. Bobby Gary was there, and we were talking about forgiveness. And we all made some observations, and we got to him, and he said, you have to learn to forgive yourself. I've never forgotten that, because I never would forgive myself. I only saw myself as a sinner. There was no hope for me. And it's like, no, there's more to you than meets the eye. You just have to accept it and recognize it. Which is part of that, allowing yourself to be recognized and accepted, which is part of humility.
You know, sometimes I wonder, in the confessional, forgive me, Father, for what I've done or for what I have not done, that we need to first forgive ourselves before we have the empathy, the ability to forgive others.
And they talk about that, where it all comes from.
I think truly great men have a grasp for it. They seem to understand it. Unfortunately, it seems to be about 1 in 10,000.
The numbers aren't there. So I'm kind of commingling the two pillars here on humility and humor. Going back to on the humor side, have you ever seen humor influence the outcome of a troublesome situation?
All the time. I've seen, I saw one where it was almost came to blows. They were screaming at him and screaming at him. He's a big burly guy, and he stood up and he said, wait, you cannot talk to me like this. I am the God of love. It just broke the whole, everybody started laughing. Throwing punches. All he said was, I am the God of love. Yeah. And I only preach love.
When I was on the standing committee for the diocese, Terry McGugan was the president of the standing committee. And Terry would make statements, and you'd hear silence. And then he'd start laughing, you know, and everybody would relax, and we'd say, hey, this isn't life or death, you know. And I think that he had a real sense of how to use humor to relax everybody so they didn't get up tense. But, I mean, he made statements that would stop you in your tracks. Yeah.
Which you wouldn't think would come from a bishop.
No, the president of the standing committee generally will take charge. The bishop is there. You know, I mean, our previous bishop from this, it was always funny to me on the standing committee because we get into a deep discussion and all of a sudden our bishop would say, I think that's enough on that topic. And I mean, he meant it. You learned he meant it. It was time to move on to something else. I always remember that about Bishop O'Neill. When he said it was time to move on, he meant it.
I was at a confirmation with Bishop O'Neill, and there was a point there, he's talking, and it's a little didactic in that way. And then he asked a question, and everybody's like, and he says, that was not a rhetorical question. So he also knew how to draw people out.
Yeah.
My father-in-law, going back, this, I was going to say this earlier, in terms of innate or cultivated in terms of a sense of humor. Every one of my wife and her siblings and her mother all recognized that he had no sense of humor.
He had no sense?
No sense of humor.
Okay.
And if he would always, if there was a joke or something, he would say things like, well, that's aimed at a 6th grade mind. And that was, he didn't laugh a lot. Or if he did, it was on, and things that were, more on the slapstick side. But he just, the subtleties of humor just seemed to just pass him right by. So everybody else would be at the table laughing and we
Yeah. I don't think I have a very high sense of humor, but every once in a while, somebody will say something and I'll start laughing, and I can't stop laughing.
So Bev, does he have a sense of humor?
That's an answer with no answer.
It's very zen of you, Jim.
I'm the only one here that has a spouse here. Come on, guys.
His sense of humor is about 4 years old, and he's proud of it.
Yeah.
Well, it tends to be pure and,
You gotta understand, I'm a 4-year-old, she's an 8-year-old. 8-year-old, you know, how, no, if,
It goes this way.
yeah.
You do it
And
this
a
way.
4-year-old
Don't do
can
it
get
that
on an 8-year-old's nerve to no end. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you guys remember the little commercial where the little boy's going up and down the aisle of the airplane, and I'm 4 years old, I'm 4 years old, I'm 4 years old. And finally, you know, they're all getting off the plane hours later, and the poor little kid's asleep, and everybody's patting them on the back as they leave. He thought that was so funny. But it's psychology, or I think it's psychology. We do have an inner child. And, you know, we go to that place for comfort. And yes, I am 8. And I know I'm 8. And I know he's 4.
and that's why it's going on a few years,
It's 55
55 years.
in a week and a half. How the hell did that happen? That goes back to the acceptance thing, by the way. We just accepted it. People fight it. Why?
Yeah.
We got a good life. Why should we fight it?
You guys are very blessed,
Yeah,
very blessed.
we are. And
And you get your,
I tell him almost every night, oh, I love my bed. I love my house. I do. We're really blessed. But we had to accept it. Because we moved. I was
Many
remembering.
times.
Yeah, too many times. I was remembering one time when we were living in Powell, Wyoming, which is pretty far north. And I had to drive to Billings to pick up his parents. And the plane that they were on was canceled, and I had to sit around and wait for the next plane. But I got home, and the first thing Jim does is sits me in the chair and gets down on his, what were you, on your knees? And says, honey, we just got transferred to Chicago. What? So his parents were there, so we flew off to Chicago, bought a house in 6 hours, and came back and had Christmas.
That's resilience.
That's acceptance. Like, okay, fine.
Yeah, so when we were trying to teach or model for kids resilience, instead of the grit idea, maybe it's less attachment and more acceptance.
Yeah.
That might be the middle path
That always bothered me because, you know, some of your kids get it and they really follow you. Our kids never got it. I mean, we tried to model things for them and they did almost the opposite. You know, it just drives you up the wall. You know, you got 2 college graduates and you dream, hey, my children are going to go through college, they're going to get these great jobs, they're going to be independent, they're going to take us out to dinner, and, you know, and so forth, and we're going, what happened?
Yeah, we own the house, we own the cars, and thank God we don't have to pay them for groceries.
It sounds like you almost need to model the opposite
Yeah.
so that they avoid it.
Well-
It's like, don't put your hand in the cookie jar in the first thing
Yeah.
you
I don't know. That's another story. Let's move on.
Yeah, so to wrap up, these 2 things on humility and humor, on page 222, there's a nice little summary here. Page 222, laugh at yourself and don't be so pompous and serious. If you were watching the movie with us here, that's when they were talking about the sourpuss face. If you start looking for the humor in life, you will find it. You will stop asking, why me? You start recognizing that life happens to all of us. It makes everything easier, including your ability to accept others and accept all that life will bring.
I wasn't here when you started, but the very first one you were talking about, I always struggle with that because I think it's so much easier as you have gone through life to then look back and laugh about it. It's hard sometimes, I think, to laugh at the time those things are happening.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, these two guys are in their 80s and they're laughing about things that had happened. But boy, I'll tell you, when they were going through some of those things, I doubt they were laughing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, especially the bishop with the horrors of Armageddon, you know, what that is, what he had to face year after year after year. How can that guy be so magnanimous and love that? What an amazing man.
It's perspective.
It's a God thing.
You know, I can laugh about some of the bad things that happened in my life, but boy, when you're going through them, you're not laughing.
Yeah. We talked about that last week in terms of pain.
Yeah.
And how you experience the pain and suffering as the pain or the event happens and you're in the middle of the event and your leg is broken. You're not going to have any other perspective than say, this hurts.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't have any. And say, yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Yeah. Just a larger event.
We as humans have a tough time just accepting us for who we are. I always remember that, Saving Private Ryan. And at the end, he says, am I a good man? After all he'd been through, he was an amazing man that he was saved by all these people. But he still felt like somehow all these people died because of me.
It's a tough thing to carry on your shoulders. So Ben's comment on acceptance leads us, you're a good straight person, leads us to the fourth pillar of joy, which is acceptance, the only place where change can begin. So we're going to start on page 223 there. This is number 4. Acceptance. Acceptance, it must be pointed out, it says at the bottom of the page. Acceptance, it must be pointed out, is the opposite of resignation and defeat. So did you hold these terms in your mind as equivalent? Acceptance, resignation, and defeat.
I think, society has long taught that acceptance means, oh, it's okay, it wasn't that bad, it's not a big deal. And I think those are big lies. To me, acceptance means this is reality. I'm looking it straight in the face. This is it. And I'm not going to put any more energy towards wishing it weren't, hoping it'll change, or resenting that it is. And then you can use all that energy to say, and now what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's been one of our life values, I guess, because every challenge is an opportunity. We don't, what was the other 2 words? Resignation and defeat. No, it's an opportunity.
To face the next day.
Well, you don't have to face it, you can enjoy it.
So to face it in that mode. My wife, all the years that she was in hospice, the problem with our healthcare system is that we fight an administrative that says it's got to have some money in it. And the nurses that say we got to do the patient care. And she was always fighting the patient care against the administrators. And she'd come home and pour herself a double shot of vodka. And I'd say, oh, you have an opportunity to grow. And she'd go, I have your opportunity. And go face it the next day.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. Did that her whole life.
Well, a lot of times I'll use the word opportunity rather than saying, this is a disaster,
An opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
Back to the AFCO.
Back to what?
AFCO.
Oh, yeah.
have to accept something, I'm not sure I'm gonna talk about an opportunity to grow, I'm gonna just wait for it to finish, or, look for my way out, or whatever, or the change that might, not sure I'm gonna guarantee myself that I'm gonna learn anything from this.
No, but funny thing is, years later, you think, oh, yeah, I did.
But in the midst of
Right, in the
it,
midst of it,
I'm
no.
just gonna suck it up, hunker down, and get through it, whatever it is.
I think
And
when
knowing that it's probably, that there is an end, is, I think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
interesting thing.
And I think when you go through some of these things, it's so much easier 10 years later to look back and see, okay, I see how everything kind of fit in place. But boy, at the time, I mean, there's been times in my life when I didn't even want to talk about there being a God. I got a problem and I've got to get through this. And then 10 years later, you look back and you say, okay, I see where God's hand was in that I couldn't see at the time.
Yeah, we can look at every move and every place we live, and we can see why we were there.
Many, many years ago, probably in the early 2000s, I think, The Economist had a cover story that said, life begins after age 50.
That begins when?
After age 50.
Oh,
And their premise was that for many people, it isn't until you reach, late middle age that you begin to have this perspective that you're talking about. That you can look back and see, the foibles that we've suffered through. And you can look at things with a sense of humor. So you do achieve a different sense of self and humor and worth. You know that you've gotten through it before, and maybe we'll get through it this time as well.
I did a lot of Faithful Live weekends, and they always have a 24-hour prayer vigil before the weekend begins. And I always made sure that I got there early. And my prayer was very simple. God, I have no idea why I'm here. I don't know any of these people, but I'm open to whatever you will have me do. And I swear, because I did that, the things that happened on the weekend were really amazing because I was open. And I've always said, well, if you can do that on a weekend, why can't you do that with your whole life?
Explain to some of the people what that is, because they may not know what.
Well, a Faithful Live weekend is just trying to uplift.
It's a team of people from all over the United States who comes into your church and professes their testimony to God,
To try to raise.
their spirituality. It is, wow.
And I've been on some great ones. I've been on some not so great ones. Yeah. So,
We've had,
changed between Alpha and Faithful Live, it changed my whole life and my relationship with God. Because it was the first time I really realized, hey, God is there with you. He has something for you to do. Just be open to what God wants you to do.
When I was at St. Anne's, we had pretty much a disastrous semester. In that even before, the week before school started, a family that had rented a house on the Oregon coast, a plane flew into the house, blew up, and killed two of the kids and their cousin. The mom and dad and the older daughter were on a walk, and they were just turning the corner of the block when they saw this happen. And of course, the mother started to run to the fire. Her husband had to tackle her, and that left the daughter hanging out with nothing. She had her cell phone. So she calls her two best friends who are in Denver, who now hear about this, and they're being traumatized within 10 minutes of this happening. And the rest of us have no idea it happened. So suddenly the phone starts to ring. And it was necessary by that afternoon to have a gathering in the chapel to, to hold up what had happened and to remind people that there was something bigger than this terrible thing. And to invite them to tell their own stories and to, just express their grief, which was so sudden and so traumatizing. So you start out the year with the loss of 2 of your students, and that would affect 2 different grades, and by around Thanksgiving, a whole family passed away because of carbon monoxide poisoning in their cabin. And we were
There was
just,
like 5 people, wasn't it?
Right.
3 children and 2 parents.
and so, we were doing the whole thing all over again. And it extremely painful when you see children grieving and not knowing what to do with it. And they're more resilient than we are. They shift gears faster than adults, generally. But, that was just a terribly rotten year. Yeah, for all involved.
And what was your own experience? Because you said you had just gotten there. So in one dimension, you had to deal with this.
I had to deal with it. In fact, I was the one who was speaking with the headmaster who was in Wyoming on vacation, saying, we're going to have to gather. I'm sorry, but we can't wait for you to get back. This has to happen now.
Yeah.
And he agreed. But so
That's a challenging thing to step into.
and I still have my grief at the loss of those 2 children, and my grief for all the pain that children were experiencing, which is something that get me every time.
The innocence. When the innocent die, it's even more tragic.
And then they were afraid. Well, this could happen to me. I never knew that a plane could fly in it.
Right.
The psychologist did a brilliant job. He said, he always had starbursts, and he said, if we had one red starburst and we filled the gymnasium with all the other colors, and you were to go in and try to grab the red, what would your odds be? That's about as much danger as you are in.
Yeah. Right.
But, to try to calm.
Yeah, or put it in perspective. Yeah, because it's visceral, because it's the same age group and they see.
Anyway, that was a time where you just had to accept and put your next foot forward and keep going.
It's hard to do sometimes.
And try to take care of yourself, in the same process. We had psychologists from probably 8 different schools that volunteered to be with us that week, just to make appointments with anybody who needed help.
And it's kind of sad to think that we now have an established protocol in schools.
Right, for kids.
In Columbine, we didn't. We were, and like you say, there are professionals who come into the school and help kids go through reading process, put it in perspective.
Yeah, I think, when our son passed away recently, Bev and I could accept it because of everything that was going on and where he was. But our daughter was a mess. It threw us because they weren't close, but they were probably closer than we were.
You need to take that computer and make computers.
Oh, okay. So just to wrap up this idea, on page 225, the Dalai Lama told us that stress and anxiety come from our expectations on how life should live. Acceptance, whether you believe in God or not, allows us to move into fullness of joy. It allows us to engage with life on its own terms rather than rail against the fact that life is not as we wish. It allows us not to struggle against day-to-day current. You mentioned Job, the book of Job, in the homily a couple months ago. And I think there's so many different lessons you get from that. And the one that I always take from it since I was a child is that life happens, and it's how you choose to react to it. Humor helps.
Not a lot of humor in Joe.
No, there isn't.
Well, there is.